Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome. We will give people a little bit to jump on our call today and then get started in a few minutes. Thank you all so much for being here. This is the Colorado Safe Routes to School webinar series. Today we're talking all about community engagement and building your community engagement capacity. So if you are here for that topic, you are in the right place. And like I said, I'll give people a few minutes to just jump right in. And we'll get started in about a minute or so. I think a lot of you are familiar with our organization, but in case you're not or need a refresher, we're a Safe Routes Partnership. We're a national organization working to advance safe walking, rolling, biking, both to schools and into everyday destinations. I'm Corey Johnson, our Program and Engagement Manager. I will be hosting this webinar, and I'm coming to you from a beautiful fall day, a little warm, but a nice fall day in Baltimore, Maryland. And just to kick us off as people are, kind of jumping in for the day, I'm curious if you all could share who you are, your location, your connection safe routes to school, and then your favorite fall activity if you have one. And my little Charlie Brown gif to get us in that fall spirit. So thanks, Matt, for kicking us off from Iowa. Nice to see you all. So again, we're just waiting for people to, join us today. Feel free to say hello, where you're joining from, and your favorite fall activity if you have one. We'll also be recording this webinar, so if anybody has to jump off early, we'll have a recording available. We'll make the slides available afterwards, and also share some additional resources. So if you miss anything, don't worry about it. We'll make sure that we get that to you in our follow-up email, and we'll send out a survey as well. So just wanted to make sure that you all were aware of that as well. All right, so let's see who is in our chat today and where people are coming from. Amber in Jackson, Tennessee. I love apple picking as well. I have not been yet this year, but it is on my list of things to do. I see Kathy from Vancouver. Thanks for joining us from Canada. It's nice to see international folks being a part of our sessions. See a lot of like mountain biking activities, taking long walks and wearing sweaters. Yes, I agree with you, Jessica. I love nice sweater weather. Hiking. I see someone from Baltimore County, very close to my neck of the woods. Nice to see you, Fritzen. Bunch of Colorado people. Thank you all for joining. All right, so keep it coming in the chat box. Again, this is our space to kind of connect and share, and feel free to continue introducing yourselves as we move forward through our session. And thanks so much for sharing your favorite fall activities. It's always nice to see what people get up to these days. So again, just a few webinar logistics before we kick off with our session today. If you could keep your comments and ideas and stories in the chat box, and then keep questions in the Q&A box, that'll be a great way for us to make sure that we can get to all of your questions by having that designated spot to do so. So questions in the Q&A box, please. Comments and resource links in the chat box. You all are doing a great job kind of kicking us off there. And also the recording and slides will be available after the presentation. So if you miss anything, don't worry about it. We will get that to you afterwards. So just a quick poll to kick us off. And again, if you're still introducing yourself in the chat, please continue to do so. And I will get us kicking off our first poll by thinking a little bit about community engagement and some of the events that happen in the Safe Routes to School world. And so I'm curious on your end, since we were talking about community engagement today, how many Safe Routes events do you implement or participate in per year when it comes to Safe Routes to School? And, and you can be liberal with your idea of what an event is. It could be walk and roll to school day or a listening session or a task force meeting. So I'm just curious, like on average, how many Safe Routes events do you do a year? So I'll give you all a few minutes to get your votes in. Take about 10 more seconds. Last call for the poll. All right, so I will go ahead and end this. So a bit of a range. We have a lot of people in, kind of like the 1 to 5 event range. A few don't do any, totally fine. A few that do more. Some are in like the 12 plus range, which, good for you for being able to do to do all of that. There's no right or wrong answer or right or wrong way to do a Safe Routes to School event. I just wanted to get a sense of, what you all are implementing throughout the school year. So thanks for sharing that. And I'm also curious to hear, again, back in the chat box, if you have some favorite Safe Routes to School events in your community. So it can be something like Walk and Roll to School Day, or something that, might be really unique to your community. Like, we always celebrate X event at our, fall festival. So if there are like any, standout highlight events that happen in your Safe Routes community, I'd love to hear a little bit about that too in the chat box. So, Walk and Roll to School Day just happened. That was definitely a fun event. I went to Celebration right outside of DC in Tacoma Park, Maryland. That was really lovely. Any other like favorite Safe Routes to School events or highlights in your community? Bike to School Week, a lot of Walk and Bike to School Day. Love, I see Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day coming up in November. Awesome. All right, so keep those coming as well. And so by the end of the session, you'll kind of get why I'm asking about Safe Routes events and why you do them. But to kick us off with this discussion today, I wanted to talk a little bit about, again, why we're talking about community engagement. You all have probably seen this slide before. You hear me talk about engagement a lot, but it's just nice to reinforce why we're talking about this in the first place. So know that community engagement matters. It builds community, builds that social connectedness piece. It can be a chance to uplift underrepresented voices, prioritize your program needs, and increase your program participation. It also helps us, hold ourselves accountable for doing what we say we actually are going to do. And it can also provide a roadmap for building more equity into our programs. And also brings an opportunity to explore new ideas and kind of create programs that fit the needs of today. And again, a lot of you are familiar with our Colorado Community Engagement Guide. This is our community engagement framework we rolled out a few years ago. That's some community engagement best practices. And this is our community engagement framework. So reflecting on your role as a community partner, doing some community research, establishing or nurturing partnerships, planning your Safe Routes to School events or experiences, implementing those events and experiences, and lastly, sustaining your engagement beyond a single event or experience or moment. And so a few years ago, last year, 2 years ago, we started a Colorado Community Engagement Guide working group, which is basically piloting out what this framework looks like. So you think about these, 6 phases. What does it actually look like in practice? And we worked with 2 communities in Colorado. One is Boulder County, and the other is Pueblo County Public Health. And we hosted, we had 4 Zoom sessions where we spent some time breaking down the community engagement framework and thinking about how can we actually turn this into, some actionable next steps. What does this look like in practice? And so today we have a great team from Boulder County who will be talking about how they use the community engagement toolkit to create a partnership resource map in their county. And we hope to have Pueblo come back and talk in the new year about the project that they worked on in their county as well. So we know that as I kind of start to introduce Boulder County's team, that community engagement can be a lot of fun, and it can feel like this often. You're out talking to families, talking to students, talking to community partners, and it can be fun and exciting and engaging and invigorating. We also know that community engagement can feel like this, especially those of you who, have done an event before, host lots of activities or programs. So while it's fun, it can also be a little bit exhausting too. And so what we're really talking about today is how you can actually engage communities and avoid burnout, and how you can build your community engagement capacity. And I think that our team from Colorado, from Boulder, has a really great example of how they've been able to, work through some of these engagement challenges and build more sustainability in their engagement practices through their partnership resource map project. So I'm going to hand it off to Avery Novotny, who's the multimodal transportation planning specialist at Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting Department, and Cami Edson, who runs the Mobility for All, the Youth and Employee Transportation Program Manager, also at Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting Department. So I'm going to hand it over to you all to share your awesome project. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Avery take it away. And Avery, you are on. And again, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box. We'll have plenty of time at the end. Yeah, Avery, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Can everybody see my presentation slide?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that intro, Corey. Really great. We are coming to you today from Boulder County and really excited to share our project that we've been working on since the spring, which goes by the name of Bicycle Event and Resource Map, which we affectionately have termed the BURN project, and you'll hear us refer to it as that throughout. So welcome and settle in.
And hello, this is going to be our quick agenda for the day. We're going to introduce ourselves next, but we're going to give you a background on the project first, and then we're going to really walk you through what we did intentionally with a group of partners and how we use a toolkit to help kind of manage that process, and then try to give you some practical tips and things we learned from that either didn't go the way we intended or went the way we intended or better, and then kind of end with a wrap up of kind of highlights around kind of next steps and how the toolkit itself really helped us manage this project as a whole, and we'll end with some Q&A. So next slide, please. I am Cami, as Corey mentioned. I run the youth transportation program under the umbrella of a larger program at Boulder County, which is in Colorado, for all of you who don't know. It's called Mobility for All. And I also do some employee transportation coordinator work. And I've been doing safe routes to school work for about 10 years now. The first 6 or 7 were really focused on a solo program called Trip Tracker. And since then, I've transitioned to do a wider variety of safe routes to school work. And as my role at the county, it really has morphed into a perch that we found the best way that I can support is to help build local capacity around safe routes to school, instead of necessarily always being the one implementing the program directly. So this project is really going to highlight how we're working on building that partner capacity so more people can begin doing safe routes to school work in our local communities. And I'll let Avery introduce herself.
Awesome. Thanks, Cami. Hi, everybody. I'm Avery Novotny, also with Boulder County, and I work with Cami on a daily basis, and I'm a multimodal Mobility for All transportation planner. And I've been with the county for a little bit, over a year, so about a year and a half, working on a whole host of different safe routes to school events and biking and programming outreach events, and have also gotten to be a part of this landscape of stakeholder, partner, and community interactions, which have lend themselves nicely to this project. So with that, we'll continue.
So just to reiterate what Corey brought up about the toolkit, it's definitely a people-centered framework, which we loved. And just the title of the toolkit itself, Working Together to Make Meaningful Change, is just like the perfect summary for what our project ended up being. Next slide, please. We're going to walk you through these 6 steps. But before we do that, I want to give you a little bit of the background of how we got here and how this project was chosen. So before the toolkit was even announced, and before the state and the Safe Routes Partnership kind of offered this pilot project, for years I had been invited to a number of different local events as probably one of the only people who focused on youth transportation by job title. Not that other people weren't doing it, but they might have had, plenty of other projects too that may not have been youth focused. So I was beginning to kind of get a feel for, in our community, who were the common players around kind of these local events. And a lot of them centered around bicycling education, bicycling safety. And through those years, multiple discussions were had with partners about how the burnout they were feeling, kind of being either the one or one of 2 agencies who kind of have to do all of the work by themselves. And then recognizing that they were experiencing burnout, I would go to the other partners event and realize they weren't necessarily talking to each other, and realize, oh, they didn't necessarily include so-and-so, or they didn't know about so-and-so to invite to their event. So just kind of organically, over time, it became clear that partners were unaware of each other but often trying to tackle similar goals. And so I started talking with partners about, would it be helpful if the county at some point was able to kind of pull all of these partners together and start talking about kind of common goals, common needs, common resources, so we could kind of figure out what's missing when it comes to hosting these local events, because it is a big lift for any of you who have done any kind of local event work or community engagement. It's time intensive on the planning part. And so while we loved being invited, we realized even partners weren't aware of what we could bring to the table when we were invited. So we kept getting asked to bring the same kinds of items or the same kind of resources, but we had much more to offer. So when Safe Routes to School, Colorado, and the National Partnership launched this toolkit, when we took a look at it and they put out kind of a call for interest, or kind of said, would we have a project that would make sense to kind of pilot test the toolkit? It was almost like, oh my gosh, I have the perfect project. I can pull it off the shelf, and we could use participating in the toolkit pilot as a way to activate this project that had been kind of brewing around among partners and we had been discussing, but it really wasn't a defined project at that point. So being offered this toolkit pilot project really allowed us to take the time to really formulate this into a clear project with clear objectives and goals. And so we're very thankful to the National Safe Routes Partnership and Colorado CDOT Safe Routes to School Partner Program for inviting us into this pilot project. And so the pilot project that we came up with is called BERM, like Avery mentioned, the Bicycle Education and Resource Map. And so before Avery was really involved in the project, even though she became our project lead, I participated in all of those 4 training sessions on the toolkit in partnership with Boulder Valley School District. And we were able to use that pilot timeframe to really define this project. And while we thought we were going to implement it that fall right after the pilot project happened, it ended up being that other projects took priority, and we really weren't able to kind of initiate or implement our project until the following year. And so during the spring of 2023, we really took the time and we took a tool that was actually from partners on our team to really create a project charter. And this project charter was really integral to Avery and I being able to clearly define what we were intending to do with partners and how we wanted to speak about it before we invited others into this process. So it established goals, timeline, budget, kind of some drafts of what the tools we were thinking about creating. And we were also using that as a way to talk with the Colorado Department of Health, who was offering, as part of this pilot, some money to support these projects. They had a small pot of money called Quick Wins, and they were allowing it to be used for incentives, especially for community-based work. Our project, which we'll get much more into, really ended up focusing on partner engagement, not community engagement. So we ended up not needing the Quick Wins money as we thought we might put it to use, because partners didn't necessarily need the incentives. We also thought we might use this Quick Wins money to hire some consultant support along the way. We'll get more into that later, but we ended up realizing we had all of the resources we sort of needed for this project through internal staff partners. So even though we envisioned needing a smaller budget for this project, I had some program money coupled with the Colorado Department of Health Quick Win funds. We ended up not needing as much money as we thought for this project, and we'll kind of get more into the details around budgeting as we go. But we are happy to share the project charter with you. We'll send it to Corey. Corey can share it afterwards, but it was just a nice 1-page summary, maybe 2 pages, that really helped us define our goals before we invited others into the project, based on all the conversations that I had had with others, to really get us to that launching off point where we felt ready to be able to talk with others about, here's a project we're envisioning, would you like to be a part of it? That's where these TAC meetings you see on our timeline come into play. I'll define what our TAC was and who was a part of it next. And Avery's going to walk you through what we really did during those TAC meetings. But just as a preview, those TAC meetings really were centered around using each of the 6 toolkit kind of chapters to really guide the work we did in this process. And our final two bullets on this timeline are sort of where we're currently at and what's happening next. So this project is not yet complete. We'll put that out there early on, but we'll talk to you about where we're at, what we've done, and what's coming next.
Awesome.
So next slide. So this is just an example of that project charter I was showing you. This is a visual. I know you can't read it. It's too small. We'll share in case you're interested. But this allowed us to really go back multiple times as we're going through the toolkit to really look at our original charter. Like, what did we say we were going to do? And for Avery and I, as kind of the project managers, we were able to really use the toolkit's chapters and our charter to really decide if we're having scope creep and to like slow our roll. Maybe that's a phase 2 part of it. It helped us reduce and cut. We don't necessarily need to do this right now. We can still accomplish the project's goals without doing this now. So having it all written out in one succinct way, in one succinct place, really allowed us to go back and make those kind of project management decision making pieces along the way that really helped us stay true to this project's goal, the BRM's project's goals. So just a suggestion, some of you might have some other wonderful examples. You might not call it a project charter, but I would just encourage all of you who are doing community engagement to just come up with a one-page summary about what you're doing and why and what your goals are, how you planned to fund it, who your partners are. Just a quick guide like this really does help, I think, organize you as project managers to do community engagement. So this was all part of kind of step 1, which was reflection in the chapter that we did as an agency intending to lead the project before we did any kind of co-reflection with partners specifically for the project. Next slide. So we've mentioned the TAC, and TAC is our community advisory board. So we knew, Avery and I, we knew we couldn't build a tool that would be obviously helpful to partners and help build partner capacity to do more safe routes type work without involving our end users. So our technical advisory committee became folks that we envisioned would be those high users of this envisioned end product we had. Which was ultimately an asset map of some kind. We didn't know if it was going to be a literal map or if it was going to be a resource guide. We didn't know what that was going to be yet, other than some sort of tool that would help partners be able to find each other to do these events, since there's a lot that do happen in our community, and realize there's maybe more support out there and more partnerships available to them than what they were at that point using and who they were reaching out to. And hopefully, like Corey mentioned, help reduce that burnout of doing community engagement when you feel like you have to do all of it by yourself, either as a solo agency or 1 or 2 agencies. So we wanted to pull together partners who represented a range of how they interact at bike events. That might be that they do education. It might be that they have sites that are physical space where they can share. It might be that they fund products. It might be that they have swag to give away. But we know partners come to these events with different resources and for different reasons. So we wanted to intentionally invite those partners who interact with these local bike events in all sorts of different ways. And I think, Avery, I think you confirmed, we invited about 10 to 12 members to be a part of our TAC, knowing that not everyone would be able to say yes. And about half chose to participate. We got quick responses right away when we did invite TAC members who said, yes, I would love to be a part of this, which was just sort of ground testing and sort of giving us that feedback that this was a project that people were interested in. So this was good. We sort of launched it. We intentionally launched it after the summer June Bike to Work week, Bike to Work month, all of these local, and May's Bike to School events. So we waited until May and June were done with those events to ask partners to be involved now, since those bike events would be fresh in their brain around either what worked for them or what didn't work for them or what their ideal situation would look like. So we invited these TAC partners this past summer after May and June's flurry of local bike events to really say, we have heard from all of you that you would like to find more partners and a better way to figure out how to find partners and who has what to offer. And so would you be interested in being a part of this asset mapping? Us as Boulder County will host and be a participant with you, but we need you to come guide what it is that you're needing and wanting, other than giving them this generic umbrella of we're interested in an asset map, since that's what we've heard and partners have already expressed that that would be of value. But what it looks like and how it comes to be determined by you, the TAC members. So we got our TAC members assembled, and we laid out an invite that said, we envision this will take 4 meetings with some work in between. And these wonderful partners who are listed below, Community Cycles, City of Boulder, City of Longmont, Bicycle Longmont, and Advent Health, were our wonderful partners who agreed to be a part of our TAC. And each of them represented a bunch of the different categories that we envisioned we would love to have be the categories that ended up in our asset map, one way or the other. And Avery, I'm going to kick it over to her next to really walk you through what did we do with these partners and how did we use the toolkit specifically to guide our partner meetings, our TAC meetings.
Awesome. Thanks, Cami. I did just want to point out and jump in at any time, Cami, that we strive to be really intentional with our first kind of invites to the TAC in our kind of initial 12. And we wanted to acknowledge that biases exist, and us as white women, we needed to open the floor to partners who are maybe not always seen or heard from. And again, just open that door and that conversation for everybody. And we've continued to try to do that throughout. And we didn't get kind of the diverse representation that we would have liked right away from our TAC, but we continue to invite them and get their feedback on lots of different things. And it's been a really good learning process, and just trying to, again, open up these conversations and to allow for everybody to have a say in what we can do for them.
Well said. Thanks, Avery.
Yeah. So yeah, now I'll actually show you guys what the M in BURM stands for, and that is the map. And before I click the link here and take us out of presentation mode, with our TAC, we discuss different ways to actually visualize and progress out of a survey and a form into what are we actually developing? What are we going to do with these results and our conversations and discussion? And then how do we transform this into a gaps analysis? And we kind of, Cami and I internally kept coming back to this idea of a map, but you can kind of see the example in our proof of concept here on the right. But we knew we needed to present different options to our TAC. And we talked about a shared calendar between all these different organizations, you know, over 50 in Boulder. And so we thought about that, sussed that out, maybe not. We talked about just having a sheet and keeping like an Excel spreadsheet of names on the county website, but just thought that that didn't incorporate the sustainable element of the toolkit and being able to have something that lives on and being able to update it frequently over time or include others onto the list. So we really voted and discussed and settled on this idea of a map, and everyone was really, really excited about it. So now I will show you guys what our map is. And it might just take a second to load. But so here's our splash page. And I just want to acknowledge that we had a wonderful and have a wonderful GIS in-house. And so maybe you and your teams don't have that, and we just want to acknowledge that assumption. But this was developed in-house with our Boulder County GIS expert, and it's looking great so far. And like Cami mentioned before, we're still very much in beta and testing and adding responses onto the site. So just bear in mind that as I show you guys. So this is our splash page. Welcome to the resource map. And basically from our TAC group, we developed a survey that those survey responses are going to develop this map and be what's on here. So our survey questions are similar, like, what's your function in these bicycle events? Are you promoting education, healthcare? And so if you're promoting healthcare, are you providing funds at events that support just healthcare? Or are you organizing helmet distribution for that health safety component? And really trying to suss who is who and who's doing what for our larger mission of this project. And that's really, we're just trying to identify partners and connect people. So all of our partners here that we have about 5 from our initial distribution of our survey just under a month ago. And so everyone that's responded gets a profile made for them. Again, that translates many of the information from their survey. And like I said, we're still in a bit of a test mode, so fixing some of these kinks, but everyone gets their mission displayed, and that organizational type again is a feature that you can search through with the filters. And then also search by geographical area, where you are and who you're able to partner with. And then all these other great details. So event participation, can you host, just provide volunteers, like how can we get people connected? So if I was coming on here as a bicycle event person, I wanted to host events, but I needed to know who around me can partner with me to provide, let's say, helmets. I can search that. Let's say they provide general support, and then they can do helmet distribution. The hope is that this map will then be like a visual phone book and populate those organizations that do have what I said, helmets, and in the service area for Boulder. So basically, this is our wonderful product that's born out of the survey and out of the TAC discussion that is launched. And then in future iterations and phases after the survey has gone out and we've collected, let's say, over 50 different organizations and agencies on here, and you stumble upon this website and you're an organization and you didn't know about this, and you can get on the map yourself and then fill out the form part of the survey and kind of help this map to live on and get connected with your community this way. So we've worked really hard to develop this, and I'm really happy with it so far, and we'll continue to develop it. But basically, you have your organizations, filters to search, and we really focused on the inventory and the people capacity for what our agencies have, and then will be presented on the map. And so in the process and in our survey, they're able to confirm, what out of the survey do they actually want displayed on here, and what is available as an external resource to partner with, and not just something that they kind of have for themselves and choose to promote it that way. So with that, I will go back to my slides. Yeah, like I said, we worked really hard to kind of come up with this tool for everybody and really visualize all of our agencies, and we'll continue to do so. So now I'll get into more of our work with the toolkit and the steps we took along the way, and some of our pivot moments that we needed to change, and then some of our highlights and like gems from this project in conjunction with the toolkit. And so the first two steps of the toolkit are reflection and research. And our role as community stewards and project leads is to encourage that throughout this project and then other programs that we might have, but especially in the engagement process. And so this was a part of the project where we really identified that to do community engagement with our partners as much as we're doing with our community, and then that really boosts and bolsters that capacity and strengthens, our relationships. So in this phase, we really begun our research of best practices for asset mapping. We found with our GIS expert a really great example and proof of concept of a collaborative map that has really helped spearhead that tool, and we were able to present that to the TAC later on. And then just really kind of understand our assumptions and clue ourselves into this bicycle and event resource stakeholder landscape. And then figure out what are our available project tools. We ended up using SurveyMonkey and like Jamboard, Google Workspace for different discussions, but finding out how we want to progress this, what tools we want to use, and what's available to us. And then we decided that before we met with our TAC, we would kind of present them with a lot of different survey questions. I think we had about like 30 questions in this picture that you see, goes on and on to the right, and there's qualitative questions and then quantitative questions that really get at the inventory of what they have and then who they are as a partner. And like I said, we had very many questions, and we decided that we would come to our TAC with all of these questions for them to react to, knowing that literally all 30 of them might just need to be scratched, and we need to take our insight from our TAC and kind of go from there. But luckily that wasn't totally the case, and Cami and I were confirmed by our TAC that we were onto something. And the whole time was us assuring them that they're our experts and that we're here to facilitate these conversations and this survey and this tool for them, and just checking with them constantly that this is right, this is wrong, this is what you need, and getting their insider information basically. And we started to develop this idea that we would need a distribution list later on for the contacts if we'd actually send our survey to. And I'll speak about that next, but that ended up being a great product and outcome of this project. And then we prepared ourselves to host for our TAC meetings, set our agendas, which the toolkit really helped us to stay on task and organized with in a non-rigid way and allowed us to be flexible, which was wonderful. And we, like Cami mentioned, we were able to strategically invite bicycle champions working at all different scales for different public organizations, nonprofits, private organizations, to get all of their really great input. And we wanted to acknowledge that coming to the table with questions and answers, we didn't want to skew whatever they would say and just think that we're presenting something to them and just expecting a green light. We really wanted to know everything that they thought and dig into that. So we wanted to be aware of that, but and just open to all of their insights. And we were really able to get that. So we presented them with the potential answers and they were able to tell us, this doesn't really fit here. And they changed the whole format of the survey. We had so many different iterations and came up with a product true to them, which is, we owe that to the toolkit for sure. So now I'll move into kind of where we started to really develop and get into this project was definitely the partner and plan phase. And so kind of my slogan for this part is create stakeholder responsive outputs for thoughtful project outcomes and build that buy-in. And so kind of what I was touching on with that group discussion and those TAC meetings is we were getting their input at this phase. And we were able to work across our Boulder County team to tap into that charter that Cami showed you earlier from one of our great colleagues and tap into our GIS partners or our internal GIS team and begin to push this project forward and like visualize what we needed to do, and then show our TAC at these 3 meetings we had before launching the survey, what the survey was going to be, how we were going to launch it, their part in it, and what we really needed out of them as well. So at our first meeting, we were able to incorporate those incorporate a first round of edits into the survey. And then Cami and I went back to our Excel sheet, tested things, started developing in SurveyMonkey. And then at meeting number 2, we really got more feedback on that survey, solidified where we were, and then with the survey, and then really started to get into the distribution list, which, like I said, is a great product that was born out of this project. And what that is, you can see on the screen, however, it's pretty small, but you can see it on the screen, is a sheet of all the contacts Cami and I could conjure up of who we partner with, who we know does bicycle events in our region, and get them on the list to then eventually take the survey. And then by introducing this sheet and sharing it with our TAC group of about 5 members, they were able to supply like at least 30 more contacts. And now we have a great like back end list of who's doing what. And as you can see on the right, like our partners were able to categorize, who's doing healthcare, who's doing nonprofit, who's more education institution based, and really get that support from them. And so they were able to just supply us with so much. And that's the value of having our TAC, is this quality of information that we just maybe wouldn't have had before without including them. And we do want to acknowledge that because we had to have, multiple TAC meetings and so many back and forths and reiterations, that it did extend our timeline, but it just made it all that much more valuable and true to our community partners. And then after the 3rd meeting, we presented the built out resource of our map, and everyone was elated and excited to use it. And we got good feedback. So we're moving forward with the map, and we solicited for any final survey edits and then launched the survey. But because of our wonderful, huge, gigantic distribution list from our wonderful partners, we decided we needed to pivot and restructure for more of a soft launch format. instead of sending our survey out to 50 partners and then handing that off to our GIS people, we wanted to restructure and do a soft launch. So we sent it out to about 20 partners instead to solicit their feedback, kind of get first takes on the survey and understand where we're at with like kind of this new second phase of implementation, and then go from there, which is another great point of internally thinking about project management and thinking what's right for us, for our charter, for our goals in our group, and getting to be able to be flexible with time was a great key from this project. So at this point, we've launched the survey and we've just had great points of reflection and partnering. And now I'll move into implement and sustain, which is, as you can see, where we are now and our next steps. And so where we are now is developing the map and having a launch survey that'll kind of be sent out in different phases to kind of get our different groups and different buckets of partners each time, and adding more and more people to the map at a really good pace. And then eventually marketing it to partners through our newsletters and different events, QR codes, whatever that may be. And then getting people routinely engaged with using it and basically making it a part of everybody's event planning. And as you can see here to our right is an example of our like survey results, and how those come in on SurveyMonkey, an example of one of our questions, which is what types of bicycle events do you host, support, plan, or donate to? And then we always have the caveat statement of this information will be displayed on the agency profile as event types, which would then be one of those filters that I showed you all a little bit earlier. But as you can see, we got a really good spread of answers, and some maybe surprising more than others, and can get a good glimpse of who's doing what and where for the bicycle event community. And then next steps is to continue gathering survey results and then circle back to our TAC group to host some focus groups and fulfill the second component of this project, which is more of a gaps analysis of where do we need to kind of build up and work more after we've now checked in with our partners and really discovered what this landscape is. And just continuing to be intentional with our TAC and our invites, and making sure voices are heard in this project. So I hope that was a good rundown of the toolkit and our workflow. And now we'll kind of go circle back to project management discussions and then get into some of our big takeaways. So this first bullet point is that it was great. And like I kind of touched on earlier, with the assumption that you might have a GIS person, you might not. We had an internal GIS person who was available to really help us build out this tool and get it going. So yeah, just wanting to acknowledge that we had that, and others may not always have that.
And can I add real quick, if you're an agency that doesn't maybe have an internal GIS person who would be able to kind of help build this map, there are a lot of other community map software that you could look and invest in yourself. It doesn't need to be GIS based necessarily. You might also reach out if you are like a nonprofit, or you might be able to reach out to your either city or county or whatever your municipal partner might be in either their planning or transportation departments. They might be called different things, but this might be a project of interest that you could partner with someone else on. We just happen to have it internal. Yeah. Oh, I see in the chat someone out the colleges and universities might be some great. So there's a number of ways to find this additional support that we found internal with our GIS person. So I don't want you to think that this project couldn't be something you could do in your community if you don't have an in-house GIS person.
Totally. Cami, do you want to continue with the?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So like we've mentioned a number of times, the toolkit and the 6 steps within it, which were, reflect, research, partner, plan, implement, and sustain. I think I got them all in the right order. Really helped Avery and I kind of guide us to make sure that we were being logical as we were kind of planning out our agendas. But the toolkit itself is not so rigid that it didn't allow for great flexibility with our kind of original ideas of timeframes and capacity it would take from us and partners. It allowed for all of that to flex throughout the project to really meet what were our needs once we got going and what were our partners' needs as we got going. Since this was a partner engagement project, we really wanted to make sure that we went at the pace and really kind of went through the steps that were logical, or that presented the steps that would make sure it felt logical to everyone involved. And that Avery and I created a Gantt chart. Again, it's just another suggested tool. I use it a lot for project management, where essentially you have your tasks going down your kind of initial columns. And then you can't see it got cut off here, but below on the very, very first column, we kind of had each of the toolkit's phases. And then going across the top, or I should be going backwards with my hands, were sort of dates and timeframes that really allowed us to keep track of what were our goal timeframes. And then we were able to go back and edit what was actual. So we would add rows and rows and rows as we were kind of going through things, even if we didn't necessarily have things written down as a row as a task originally. We were able to add them along the way. So for those of you who like to be really organized with your projects, we're happy to share this as a sample. But we wanted to be very conscious that we knew this project was not going to be a full-time effort from our partners, nor could it be for either Avery or I. So we wanted to make sure that what we outlined and what we initially invited people to, and then what actually ended up happening, was doable within the limited capacity we had to put towards this project, as well as what our partners had to put towards this project. When we sent out our invite in early summer to our partners, this was not an envisioned project that they would have had maybe on their work plan for the year. So we knew this was going to be extra. But again, the fact that partners, it was conceptualized to be something that partners had already brought up, something that would be of value to them. It ended up working that they found it valuable enough to come in and be a part of this project. So we wanted to make sure that we were as organized as possible so we didn't waste anybody's time. So between the Gantt chart and kind of using the toolkit as a way to keep ourselves organized as the facilitators of this process, I think we really kind of hit our goal to make sure that we were being efficient, not only with our time, but with efficient and effective with our time as well as our partners' time. And that allowed for us to have high quality engagement instead of just high quantity engagement. So that was really what we were hoping is, and what we took away from the project is that the toolkit and just having an organized, simple spreadsheet for ourselves really led us to kind of quality versus quantity. And Avery, I'll let you kind of talk about, when people talk about projects, we always want to know how much was the budget and how much capacity did you put into it, how much time did it take? So we wanted to give you sort of what that reality was for us. Avery, I'll let you go first and then I'll follow up.
Yeah, like Kimmy kind of touched on prior, we were able to be flexible and creative with how we were going to fund this versus how much we could put into it as staff time, and be realistic about hitting our timeline with our workflow and our work plans. So like the little bubble down below says, we started in spring, we're still working now. So it's been about 5 months. And I would say that I worked about 10 hours weekly on this project in conjunction with our other 2 staff members while maintaining other projects. And it didn't bleed over into other things and kind of scope creep and take on a life of its own, which was great to just stay managed by through the use of our Gantt chart and our toolkit. And it felt really manageable this whole time with, so much support and kind of aligning our goals.
And since Avery was sort of the project lead, I ended up supporting her, even though I was involved more in the pilot training phases. I was kind of her number 2, her backup, her support. I definitely did not put 5 to 10 hours a week in on it like she did. I was probably at 5 or under per week. And then Sean, our GIS expert, came in probably sometime this summer. He wasn't necessarily involved in May, and has been working with us on, this is one of many projects that he's working on through since the summer until now as well. And probably we envision getting that first full draft of the map fully filled out with that soft launch group of a smaller batch of our distribution list versus the whole distribution list. Because we really, again, we wanted to make sure that we understood how much time was it going to take for us to have to data clean afterwards and kind of work on those back end teams, those back end data cleaning pieces. We wanted to have a better sense of what that would take with a smaller batch of people before we launched to everyone that our partners had envisioned. And again, our partners, our TAC members, agreed with that approach, that makes sense for us to make sure that the version of the tool we're using now and the version of the output we're creating now makes sense before we invite the entire distribution list to participate. So if this partner resource mapping kind of idea or topic is of interest to you, whether it's bike related or not, we just wanted to share that using the toolkit and having some homegrown organizational tools, it probably wouldn't require full-time effort for you either, unless you had a time frame that required you to get it done much faster than what we've been able to do it. But if you have the time and the flexibility to kind of go at a slower pace and develop it kind of in partnership with others, it would not require full-time effort to do this. So just for kind of perspective framing.
Yeah. Okay, and lastly, with about 10 minutes left of the presentation, we'll kind of get into our major high-level toolkit takeaways. And one we've mentioned previously in the presentation is that the toolkit was a great way to just organize our thoughts, our agendas, and our TAC meetings, and then bringing others on board to fulfill these chapters of the actual toolkit. And it just really, really solidified the project in so many ways and deepened our opportunity for partner engagement. And yeah,
Oh, good.
we were able to work towards eliminating bias and work through those conversations and acknowledge so much of that, like the toolkit does suggest. Did you want to add something, Kimmy?
Oh, I was going to say, and we'll just continue to keep working on that bias elimination and being intentional about inviting people into this process to be a part of the map. So it's not our version of what we think partners do. It'll be partners speaking for themselves. And then again, over time, part of the sustainability piece would be, we'll adjust the tools if we learn along the way as we get a more diverse group of respondees on the map, that if the question or the categories and the answer choices aren't correct, it's something that we could adjust in the future. Since we weren't necessarily able to get everybody we had hoped for involved in the TAC process. And I'll say that we've mentioned that the toolkit is really logical to follow. It's not rigid. It's not necessarily linear. We were always probably flowing between 2, maybe even 3 of the toolkit steps in any of our meetings with TAC partners. So it's very, very user-friendly. We didn't necessarily need to fully train our TAC on the toolkit. As we presented things that were logical to us from pulling pieces from the toolkit, it was logical to them why we were doing what we were doing when we talked to the TAC about agendas and what we were going to do this meeting versus the upcoming meeting. And it allowed us to meet our partners where they were at. They gave us so many great suggestions that allowed us to kind of pivot and adjust what we thought might be agendas and our timeframes, really based on, again, their engagement. And so it really was a partner-led project, even though we just facilitated it. And I think the toolkit works even if you're not doing, or even if you don't do Safe Routes to School specific projects. The toolkit is so easy. It's not like it's this 25, 30 step process that you have to follow exactly to feel like you're doing it right. It's these 6 great, clear, logical kind of buckets that can really keep you organized in what you're doing. And everything in our Gantt chart that we kind of had an image of before fits in one of those 6, if not multiple buckets. So it was just a nice way for us to have that touch point that we're on the right track and we're doing community engagement intentionally. And it felt good to just have the toolkit to refer back to make sure we weren't missing any major components to engagement in this process. And I totally envision that I'll use these same kind of 6 buckets moving forward, since they're now in my brain and I kind of have them memorized. It makes it easier, and that we have this wonderful reference guide to look back at whenever we need to for maybe some more examples or some specific suggestions, if they aren't necessarily popping into our brain of like, how do we do this step versus this step? So really, really just encourage all of you to really check out the toolkit. If you haven't yet, it's not super long. And again, it's very user friendly. It allows for great flexibility. It really helped us stay super organized. And I think it ultimately helped us reach our creating our two tools to get to this point of having a map in an easier way than what we would have done had we not just kind of followed and organized ourselves under kind of the 6 buckets. We probably would have gotten there eventually, but I like that this toolkit just really helped guide us through the process.
Yeah. So just a thank you to everybody for staying on and listening to our presentation. A thank you to Corey with Safe Routes, Sean, our JS person, and to the Mobility for All team as well. Not to make this my Oscar speech, but thank you, everybody.
And thanks to Cavi and Avery for leading this project and, sharing this information with everyone. Just to reiterate what they were saying about, like doing something similar in your own community, or, maybe you don't have a GIS expert or a lot of in-house support. There's still ways that you can do something similar in your community, whether it's applying for a Safe Routes to School grant to support some of this work, using some of your already existing Safe Routes to School funding, partnering with in-house staff or external partners. I mentioned colleges and universities have a lot of resources to offer when it comes to GIS mapping or research or tech support or things that you might not actually have within your program. And they want to help. So your college and university partners are awesome for these types of projects. And also, start small. Maybe you're not building a whole partnership resource map. Maybe you're just learning who else is out there and having a series of, casual meetings to see, who has helmets or who has event space or who has giveaways. So it can be something small. And also, find the tool or the strategy that works for you. So in this case, with Cami and Avery's project, this was a tool that worked for them. You might have another tool that'll work for you. Maybe a spreadsheet does work or a shared calendar does work. That's totally fine. And lastly, like I just mentioned, a few other, tips or ideas for building your engagement capacity. Those regular partner check-ins are super important. Also reaching out to new partners and exploring those in-house partners. Maybe your in-house partner isn't a GIS person. Maybe it's a media specialist who can come in, take photographs of your event, or maybe it's a communications person or somebody else, like within your organization or agency who can actually, help ramp up your engagement capacity. Attending somebody else's event is also a great way to kind of see how other people do things, who else is out there. And then lastly, like knowing when to say no. So Cami and Avery talked about not spending a whole lot of time on this project. This wasn't a full-time project for them. So they knew their own capacity to do this work. And sometimes that means like saying no to things like, should I build out should I increase the scope of this project? If you can't do that, that's okay. Say no. Or if you can't do 30 events per year, that's okay. So knowing when to say no, I think, is really another important part of building your, engagement capacity, and also limiting some of that burnout.
Can I add to
So
that, Corey, real quick?
yeah.
Just to say there was a lot of great ideas that we said, no, not now, but like maybe later. Like we put
Yes.
a lot of things in a parking lot that could be like potential phase 2, phase 3 kind of ideas. There's no commitments to follow through on those yet, but we're tracking all of these ideas and we now have these wonderful ideas. So there was a lot more of no, not now, but maybe later, I would
Yep.
say, instead of just a hard, I know you
Yes.
didn't mean necessarily a hard no,
Yep.
but that's kind of the reality of our conversation and
Yep.
how they went.
Absolutely. Yep. I love that. Thanks, Cami. So I put a link to the toolkit in the chat box. I'll also send a link to that after the webinar, along with some of the other resources that Avery and Cami mentioned. Like I said, this is a very living document. So if you want to, take a look at the map or contact the GIS person or either of them just to know a little bit more about how this all worked, I'll make sure that you have the tools to do that as well. And I also wanted to, before we wrap up, do a quick plug for our Colorado folks. We're now accepting applications for our Safe Routes to Parks Activating Communities program. This is available for communities in Colorado. You have to apply by the 21st to receive some awesome customized 9-month technical assistance for supporting our Safe Routes to Parks program. It's a $10,000 grant that will be awarded to 4 nonprofits in Colorado. And we have an info session about that on November 1st, so join us for that. And our final Colorado webinar for the year will be on November 8th. We'll be talking about telling your safe route story and exploring some media and messaging strategies for how to do that. So a link for that will be coming out soon. We hope to see you there. And again, if you have any other questions about what you heard from today or other things happening in the Safe Routes world, feel free to reach out to me. And thank you so much to Cami and Avery for all of your work and your willingness to share your project. We look forward to seeing how it evolves over the coming months. And thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate it. And we will see you in November. If you're coming to the Safe Route School Summit, we'll see you in about 2 weeks. So have a good one, everyone. And I will be in touch with a follow-up email later today or tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks.